Welcome, I'm Jana with Purl Together, and in this week's technique video, I want to talk about a better way to swatch in the round. So in the past, we've talked a lot about swatching in the round versus swatching back and forth and how you really need to do what matches the project you're intending, because often people's tension is a little bit different when you're knitting back and forth, making stockinette, or knitting in the round where you're not purling anything. Sometimes making those purl stitches where you bring the yarn to the front causes your stitch to be a little bit looser because of that extra yarn between the knit and the purl. That's not always true for everybody, but it is kind of a general accepted rule of thumb. So swatching in the round is important if you're knitting in the round. We're about to start the Quill Tee knit along. I'll put the pattern down below in the video description. So if you'd like to join us for that, cast on will be on Friday. And if you can't cast on until Saturday or Sunday or whatever, that's totally fine. But we want to swatch in the round. So I'm going to show you what I think is a little bit better way to do that. Okay, before we hop over to my work table to do that, I want to give a shout out and a big public thank you to 3 new patrons that joined in the last week to 10 days. So thank you so much for joining the Patreon community for Purl Together. I appreciate that so much. That's how we keep these videos coming to you each and every week, by members like you making a small monthly pledge each month. So a huge thank you to Diana, Barbara, and Laura for joining in just the last week or so. Makes a huge difference. So you can check down below a link if you're interested in joining. You can also head on over to patreon.com/Purl Together, and you can see what I'm offering for a small monthly pledge. Okay, let's get started with the swatch. I found this method of swatching to be a lot neater, certainly, than the swatching in the round where you just end here and then you take this big long float around the back trying to tension that. So this method, you do have loops over here and this side is a little loose and wonky, but you don't have the great big floats along the back. So I think it is more consistent for measuring. So let me show you how we're going to do this. You don't have to have such big loops if you knit continental, and I'll show you why. So if you knit continental, then you're going to want to take maybe 3 or 4 lengths that are equivalent to the width of your swatch. So that would be 1, 2, 3.5 maybe. And then you would simply put your yarn over your finger just like you normally would if you're knitting in a continental method, which I don't, so bear with me while this is super awkward. And then you would go through and pick up. And you're tensioning your yarn over your left finger just like you normally would if you're knitting continental. So you don't have to have a lot of extra stuff to tension and weave through your fingers if you're knitting in that way, because you're just using your loop as your working yarn. So this is the extra that comes off the ball or the skein. Now, if you're knitting English and you're throwing and you tend to wrap your yarn over your fingers like I do, then you are going to need a little more of that loop. You're going to need more slack in order to tension your yarn correctly as you normally would, so that you're not distorting your stitches, because that would defeat the purpose of the swatch entirely. You want your swatch to be representative of how you usually do your work. So if I only give myself enough of a loop, like 4 lengths of my swatch, then I'm going to start running out of available yarn to tension. So it works just fine, like I said, if you're doing continental. But for me, I need to measure off more like 5 or 6 lengths of that needle or the width of my swatch in order to have enough to tension my loop. So when you do that, I'm going to go ahead and back this out and do it the way that I normally do, but I wanted to show you that if you're knitting continental, then it works out. You have to have less slack, and your loops on your left side of your swatch will be smaller. So I hope that makes sense. Drop a comment down below if it doesn't. So that's why mine are bigger than you'll see like on other people's tutorials. Their loops are really small. That's because they knit continental and they get away with that. It's still, even this way, even the fact that I have longer loops, it's still much neater than the other way, where you have the big long floats around the back. So I measure off between 5 and 6 lengths that match the width of my swatch. So there's 3, 4, 5, and some. 5 usually works pretty well. Now, the other thing you want to be mindful of is keeping this over on the right, because this comes from the ball or your working yarn. So you need to make sure that you hold the strand that you're working with behind, and then go ahead and tension like normal and knit across. So it really is pretty accurate for stockinette. And you'll notice I have some purl bumps right here. So I learned this from a patron of mine, Sharon. Big shout out to Sharon. Thank you for the tip. This has 7 purl bumps because that's a reminder that I used a size 7 needle for the section of swatch down below. Then I switched, and now I'm trying my swatch with 6s. So I want to wash and block this swatch when I'm done so that I can have an accurate representation of how many stitches per inch and row gauge that my sweater will be using these various size needles. Now, if you're about to start the Quill Tee knit along with us, this Friday is cast on. If you're going to start that with us, then I would also suggest doing a swatch with your color work with the needle size that the designer recommends, because you want to see how doing that color work is going to change your gauge potentially as well. So as I'm getting over here across, you can see I have enough to tension accurately with. And like I said, that's why my loops on the left side are so long. That's okay. So when you get to the other side, I like to, kind of tighten that up. You're going to slide your needle through, whether that's DPNs or circulars. You're going to slide that through to the other side and carry on with your working yarn. And you've left your loop over here. So you only have to do that loop business every other row. So hopefully that makes sense to you. And I have found this to be a more accurate way of measuring, or a more accurate way of swatching than doing the big float behind your hand method. Now, the other advantage here is, well, as with the big float method, but you can reuse your swatch. If you need to take this out, it's totally fine. You haven't cut anything. You can just unravel it and use it should you need to. All right, I'll show you that one more time. I've knitted all the way across with my working yarn. I like to kind of tighten things up a little bit on the left side. Then I'm just going to simply slide all of this over to the other end. I'm going to measure off. If you're using continental method, you could probably get away with 3.5 to 4 lengths of your needle, not lengths of your needle, the width of your swatch. I'm going to do 4.5 to 5 because that's what I need for the way I tension my yarn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish. Okay, now the left side is my loop. The right side goes to my ball or skein. All right. Now, I'm going to just start tensioning my yarn, making sure that I have the loop part coming off the bottom of my hand, and go on across. I have found this to be a pretty fast way of swatching in the round. Why do we want to swatch in the round? Just a reminder that you want your swatch to be as representative as possible of your finished work. When you measure your swatch, we're going to wash it and block it, but you can do that on your own. But I'm just going to show you when I measure this. I want to have a good representation, right? I definitely have 4 inches worth here, but I want to be able to measure in several different places, right? And keep in mind that your edges are going to be a little distorted. And then, the first row above my number here, this is a size 7, so I did 7 purl bumps. The first row above that is going to be somewhat distorted too. So I want to knit enough where I'm going to have a pretty accurate representation of how many stitches per inch that I get with each size needle that I'm trying out. Okay, just to recap what I've done here, you can see all my loops over on the left side. Now I know this is way too long and I'm working out how to mitigate that, but it doesn't really matter. I have plenty of yarn to swatch with, as well as, being able to reuse this because I haven't cut anything. And it did dry flat. I'm going to wait another probably half a day at least. I just want to make sure it's all the way dry before I measure. But like I mentioned, I made 7 purl bumps right here. So what I've knitted down below is a size 7 needle, and then this is a size 6, and then I practice some of the color work as well for the quill tee. So I'm going to measure each of these spots. If I need to make another swatch, because I didn't get gauge, that's totally okay. It's well worth doing. So, but this is easy to take out and wind up and reuse should I need it. So after this week, on Friday the 11th, we'll have our cast on video. And then after that, I'll go back to uploading in the middle of the week, more like Tuesday, Wednesday, as I have in the past, just so you'll know what to expect going forward. So this is a pretty straightforward knit. I expect it to be 3 or 4 weeks, not too much. I would love to see the yarn you're using for your project. Feel free to tag me on Instagram, post photos in the Purl Together Ravelry and Facebook group, and let me know what yarn you're using and how your swatch went. Okay, I'm looking forward to casting on with you on Friday.